The fluorescent lights of the emergency room buzzed overhead like angry wasps as I pressed my palm against the gunshot wound in my abdomen, watching my blood seep through my fingers in dark, rhythmic pulses. I was 28 years old and I was dying on a Tuesday. But that's not where this story begins. It begins 3 weeks earlier, with her, a woman whose name I didn't know, whose face I'd barely noticed, whose single act of unexpected kindness would save my life in ways I couldn't possibly imagine. I'd been running late that morning, as usual. New York doesn't wait for anyone. And neither does the investment firm where I'd spent the last 6 years climbing a ladder that seemed to stretch endlessly upward. My life was a blur of quarterly reports, client meetings, and 16-hour days that left me hollow and exhausted. I'd stopped seeing people along the way. They'd become obstacles, delays, inconveniences between me and wherever I was rushing to next. The homeless woman sat outside the subway entrance at 42nd Street. Same as always. I'd passed her hundreds of times, maybe thousands. She was part of the scenery, like the gum-stained concrete or the faded graffiti on the newspaper stand. Her cardboard sign said something about being a veteran, about needing help, but I'd never actually read it. Not really. My eyes would slide right over her, the way they slid over everything that didn't contribute to my upward trajectory. That morning, though, something made me stop. Maybe it was the way the early light caught her face, revealing lines that spoke of stories I'd never asked to hear. Maybe it was the fact that she was actually reading, a battered paperback that looked like it had survived a war itself. Or maybe it was just that I'd finally burned out enough to see beyond the end of my own nose. I pulled out my wallet and dropped a 20 into her cup. She looked up, and her eyes, clear and sharp despite everything she'd endured, met mine. "God bless you, honey," she said, her voice raspy but warm. "You look like you're carrying the whole world on those shoulders." I mumbled something non-committal and hurried down the subway steps. But her words clung to me like cobwebs. How did she see that? How could someone with nothing see through me when I'd spent years constructing the perfect facade? The next morning I stopped again. This time I brought coffee. We didn't talk much. I didn't have time. I told myself, but I learned her name was Margaret, and she'd served 2 tours in Iraq before the system failed her in all the ways. Systems fail people society decides aren't worth the trouble. It became routine. Every morning, coffee. Sometimes a breakfast sandwich. Small kindnesses that cost me almost nothing but seemed to light something up in Margaret's weathered face. And slowly, imperceptibly, something began to shift in me too. I started noticing other people. The tired mother with 3 kids on the train. The elderly man struggling with his grocery bags. The teenager whose eyes held the same hollow exhaustion I saw in my own mirror. I started helping. Little things. Offering my seat. Holding doors. Actually looking at people when they spoke to me. My colleagues thought I was losing my edge. Maybe I was. Or maybe I was finding something I'd lost long ago. 3 weeks after that first coffee, everything changed. I was walking home late from the office, cutting through an alley I'd used 100 times before, a stupid shortcut that saved maybe 3 minutes. I heard the footsteps behind me too late. The gun pressed into my back felt cold even through my coat. "Wallet, phone now!" The voice was young, shaking, desperate. I should have been terrified. Instead, in that crystalline moment, I felt an overwhelming sadness. I turned slowly, hands raised, and saw a kid who couldn't have been more than 19, his face concealed by a bandana, but his eyes wild with fear and something else, shame maybe, or resignation. "Okay," I said softly. "It's okay, here." I reached for my wallet, moving slowly. But something in my voice, or my face, or the way I was looking at him like he was a person, and not just a threat, something made him hesitate. The gun wavered. "I'm not going to hurt you," I said, which was absurd because he was the one with the weapon. "I just want to help." "Shut up!" he screamed, and the gun steadied again. "Just shut up and give me—" The shot came from behind him. Later, they'd tell me it was an off-duty cop who'd heard the commotion. The bullet meant for the kid struck me instead when he spun around. I felt the impact before the pain, like being punched by a fist made of fire. I fell, the kid ran. The world tilted sideways and started to gray out at the edges. I don't remember much about the ambulance ride. I remember lights. I remember someone saying my blood pressure was dropping. I remember thinking about Margaret and wondering who would bring her coffee tomorrow. In the ER, as doctors and nurses swarmed around me with controlled urgency, I heard a voice I recognized. "That's him! That's the man!" I turned my head. Even that small movement sent lightning, bolts of agony through my core, and saw Margaret pushing past a security guard, her plastic bags clutched to her chest. "Ma'am, you can't be in here," a nurse started. "That man saved my life." Margaret's voice cut through the chaos with surprising authority. "Every day for 3 weeks he's shown me I matter. I'm not leaving him. They should have removed her. Hospital policy, infection control, a dozen bureaucratic reasons. But something in her fierce determination, or maybe just the recognition of a fellow human being in crisis, made them pause. A doctor nodded and Margaret was allowed to stay, standing just outside the trauma bay where she could see me through the glass. The surgery took 6 hours. The bullet had nicked my liver and stomach. I'd lost a dangerous amount of blood. My prognosis, I'd learn later, had been uncertain at best. But I survived. And when I woke up 36 hours later, dried flowers from a corner bodega sat in a plastic cup by my bed. Margaret had spent her entire day's earnings on them. The kid turned himself in 2 days after the shooting. His name was Marcus, and he was homeless too. Had been since he aged out of foster care at 18. He'd never held a gun before that night. He'd never hurt anyone. He was just desperate, and hungry and out of options. In a world that had chewed him up and spit him out before he'd even had a chance to become someone. Lying in that hospital bed, tubes running in and out of me, I made a decision. The life I'd been living, the endless pursuit of more, the careful blindness to suffering, the elevation of personal success above all else, it had nearly gotten me killed. But more than that, it had been killing me slowly for years in ways I'd been too busy to notice. I didn't go back to the investment firm. Instead, I used my savings to start a foundation. Small at first, just me and a mission to help people like Margaret and Marcus navigate the systems designed to keep them invisible. We provided housing assistance, job training, mental health services. We treated people like they mattered because they did. Margaret became my right hand. Her insight into what people actually needed proving more valuable than any MBA. Marcus, after serving community service and completing a counseling program, I helped arrange, joined us too. He ran our youth outreach program, reaching kids before desperation could turn them into statistics. The foundation grew, not quickly but steadily. We helped dozens, then hundreds. Every person we assisted was a reminder that we're all just a few bad breaks away from needing help ourselves. Every success story reinforced what Margaret had shown me that first morning. Kindness isn't just about helping others. It's about recognizing our shared humanity in a world that constantly tries to make us forget it. 5 years later, I stood in front of a room full of donors, people with resources who'd chosen to invest in humanity, and told them about the morning a homeless veteran had seen me more clearly than I'd seen myself. About a kid who'd made one terrible decision in a life that hadn't offered him many good options. About the bullet that had torn through my body but somehow mended my soul. We call it her foundation, I said, because it started with her. With Margaret. With a woman the world had decided didn't matter. But she mattered. She matters. And so does every person we serve. They're not statistics or social problems. They are us. They're our neighbors, our fellow humans, our responsibility. Margaret sat in the front row, wearing a dress she'd picked out herself for the occasion, living in her own apartment now with a job managing our intake services. Marcus sat beside her, enrolled in community college, his future finally as bright as his potential had always been. I caught their eyes and smiled. The scar on my abdomen still ached sometimes, especially when it rained, but I welcomed that pain. It reminded me of what I'd learned, that we're all connected in ways we can't always see. That kindness isn't weakness. It's the strongest force we have. That humanity, real, messy, imperfect humanity, is worth fighting for. That sometimes it takes nearly dying to remember how to truly live. After the event, Margaret hugged me tight. "You know," she said, "you didn't save me that morning. We saved each other." She was right. She always was. In trying to help someone else, I'd found my way back to myself. In her suffering, she'd held up a mirror that forced me to see my own. In the end, we're all just walking each other home. hoping our small kindnesses light the way. That's what humanity is. Not grand gestures or perfect solutions, just people choosing again and again to see each other, to help when they can, to remember that every face has a story, every story matters, and every act of kindness ripples outward in ways we may never fully understand. The boy I'd been running, through life blind to everything but ambition, had died in that alley. The man I'd become was still learning how to live, but I was learning it alongside people who taught me the most important lesson. We rise by lifting others, and we find ourselves by refusing to look away from those who need us most. This is not a story about heroes. It's a story about humans, about the choice we make every single day to either see each other or to pass by unseeing, about how the smallest acts of recognition can save lives in ways bullets never could. It's a story about her, about Margaret, who showed me that having nothing doesn't mean being nothing, about Marcus, who proved that mistakes don't define us if we're given the chance to grow beyond them, about every person who's ever felt invisible, praying someone would finally see them. But mostly, it's a story about us, about what happens when we choose connection over convenience, compassion over comfort, humanity over everything else. Because in the end, we're all just trying to find our way home, and the only light bright enough to guide us there is the light we shine for each other.